How's it going, everyone? Hopefully doing well. Welcome to the 260 mission guides. Now in these guides I will make them all separately. So in this one it is going to be for TDs, and then next week we'll have medium tanks or something, or heavy tanks or whatever. But we are going to go through all of them, including the SPGs. One thing that I will say is that I would suggest you use your skips on the SPGs because they are the most annoying to try and get through. And why Wargaming even has the SPG missions in the first place, we'll never know. But there we go. Let's move in to TDs. So straight away, go up to your campaign at the top next to the service record and missions, and you'll be greeted with the operations map. Now, everything that I'm going to say in here does go to the Stug, the Concept, the T55A, and of course the 260. Now, the way that these missions work is that the 260 missions are the hardest, but they only kind of scale down. The missions aren't different dependent on kind of what tank you're doing. So for example, let's go into TD15 and you'll see that it says cause 8,000 HP of damage as the primary condition. But if we go down to the Stug, it's exactly the same, but it's only 2k damage. Nothing else about the mission has changed. I mean, and destroy 2 vehicles and win the battle. Let's see if it's even the same on this. Destroy 6 enemy vehicles and win the battle. So it just scales up with the difficulty depending on that. It's not going to be different at all. So no matter what stage you are at and what tank you're trying to get, this will apply to you, whether it be the Stug or all the way up to the 260. Now, obviously, I am going to be talking about the 260 missions, but just keep that in mind that they are easier throughout the others. And the tank recommendations are still going to apply, but you may be able to do it in other tanks that you find enjoyable or you just do well in, for example. Now, the last thing that I do want to mention is that you need to have at least a tier 4 to start the Stug missions, a tier 5 to start the T28 missions, and a tier 6 to do the T55 and the 260 missions, or above, obviously. So without further ado, let's begin. So for the first mission, it is pretty simple. All that you have to do is come top on your team by experience earned. Obviously, it's going to go down, and I think it's be top 7 on like the Stug, and you don't even need to survive the battle to do it with honors. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you are kind of looking at what mission you need to do and not just going off, you know, the 260 missions. But we're not going to keep going on about the Stug missions and everything else like that. We are going to be focused on this, but just make sure you're keeping in mind what mission you need to do. So to do this, honestly, just play any TD that you feel comfortable in and that you enjoy playing, because if you're not the best of players, you're going to have to take some time to actually, you know, play the game and eventually get it. If you're in a TD that you don't really enjoy, then there's no point doing that, is there? So just play a tank that you enjoy. You can play anything above tier 6, so just pick your favorite tank and just play it, and eventually this will get done. I wouldn't worry about completing any of these missions with honors at the moment, apart from TD15. Unless you want the extra awards, there's not really much point of doing that, and we'll move on to that later on. Now, for this one, for TD2, you need to do a critical hit and do damage. Now, this is actually a lot harder than it kind of first seems, because you might think, okay, well, you know, it's just do 5,000 damage and then do 3 critical hits or do out, you know, some crew members. But you could get 5,000 damage and never even crit anything or do any crew members at all. And it is a pain to be able to do this. This will take you a few attempts, and it's probably not going to be the best if you don't have a wide variety of tanks to choose from, because you're going to need tanks that do quite a bit of damage and at the same time are going to do a lot of crit damage as well. So tanks like the Jagdpanzer Z100 are probably going to be your best bet if you have it. If not, the WT Panzer IV is actually pretty good for this. Use a 560 alpha damage gun so that you can quickly get in the shots and do tracking damage at the same time. And you may even be able to get some people set on fire. And if you set people on fire, then that is basically your free crit damage done in just one go. And then you just need to get 5k damage. The 5k damage is going to be obviously player skill dependent. If you're not very good at the game, it's going to take you a long time. If you are comfortable in the tank, then it's not going to take you too long at all. It's just luck at the end of the day, whether or not you get the matchup that you need. But yeah, all the best, because this one is a bit of a pain. For TD3, you need to cause damage to 6 enemy vehicles and win the battle. This one is not an issue at all. Bearing in mind, you can use tier 6 and above. I would recommend you use tier 6, because if you can find a tank that has a very, very fast rate of fire, you can cause damage to 6 enemy vehicles in no time. It doesn't matter how much damage you do, just do the damage. And then if you win, great. If you don't, move on to the next game. Hopefully you get it in the next game. But to cause 6 damage to enemy vehicles is pretty easy. If we take a look at the tech tree, most tier 6 tanks are actually pretty good for this. If you can get something like the Jackson or even the Hellcat, if we go down here, these are fine. Even the Super Hellcat, the tier 7 reward that everyone got for when they logged in or whatever it was. It's not too bad, because even with this 90mm gun, you still get a good enough rate of fire to put 6 shells in. Or you could go all the way down to, you know, the 76mm gun, and this would probably be better for the mission, but at the same time, you could just get a little bit more damage. So, whatever you want to do. I mean, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but just make sure you have something that is fast enough rate of fire to get out those shells, and you should be fine. E25 is pretty much a cheat code for this mission, if you have one, because it reloads in like 2 seconds. So you could easily shoot 6 different enemy vehicles without any problems. And they do need to be different. It's not just do damage to 6 vehicles, as in like, oh look, I've shot this same vehicle 6 times. It needs to be a different vehicle every single time. So shoot 6 different enemies, win the battle, you're good. Now for TD4, again, the E25 is a little bit of a cheat code for this, because you need to destroy 4 enemy vehicles and remain unspotted at the time of their destruction. You don't need to win, you don't need to lose, you don't even need to survive if you just want to do the primary condition. This is pretty easy if you find the right map. If you're on Himmelsdorf, a little bit difficult, I won't lie. But if you're on basically anything that has bushes, just double bush, go behind the bush, make sure it's fully solid and you can't see through it, and then just shoot. You should remain unspotted, and as long as you get the kill, that's 1 kill added to your collection, and just do that 3 more times. Again, for tanks that have fast rate of fire, if you can do that and finish off the low HP tanks, then that's great. If not, even something like a 704 or ISU-152 could be pretty decent for this. At the end of the day, it's only 4 enemy vehicles that you need to do. It's not like you need to get a Top Gun or something out of this. So it doesn't really matter too much. Even just find your favorite tank and just play there. Go back in some bushes and just try and do that. It shouldn't take too long. Even I think, you know, people that aren't as good at the game can still get this done in probably 1 session. You could probably easily do this in 1 session. So, you know, a few games, you get it done. It'd be good. Now for TD5, any tank you want. I'm not joking. Like, it's 300 meters, which is kind of far, but not, you know, so far away. And as long as you just stay at the back of the map and just get some shots off, you're probably going to need something that's a little bit accurate. I wouldn't recommend, you know, like anything with a derp gun or something like that, but you could end up doing it. Depends how RNG is treating you. Just anything that has a good enough rate of fire, obviously, because destroying 3 enemy vehicles. Again, you could use an ISU-152. You could use something that's lower tier. You could probably even do this with an SU-100. Yeah, there's plenty of options available to you for destroying this. Just make sure that you have your team in front of you and you are behind. The best map for this, probably, or one of the best maps, is actually Corellia. If you can get behind the rock and the bushes on the east side of the map, from either side, and just let your team spot, and then you can shoot, you should be able to do this in no time at all. Obviously, it's fun in that map, but there are other maps as well. Prokhorovka, for example, Malinovka can do it. You've got plenty of options. And this, again, the exact same thing applies as this one. Not so much needing a faster rate of fire, because you could easily do this in a tank that has a good alpha damage. I mean, you could even do this in like a Jagdpanzer 100, to be honest, or an FV even. So yeah, it's only 250 meters, which isn't as far as you would think. Bearing in mind, you're going to be at, whatever your dispersion is at 100 meters, so it's going to be basically double, and then a little bit more, 1.5 times your dispersion. So keep that in mind. But it's not going to be too hard to do this. It will take a few games, but just like the other mission, make sure your team's in front of you and make sure that you are not getting spotted, because that way it is a hell of a lot easier to do this mission. Now, TD7 is a little bit annoying to do because you are going to need something that is quite stealthy. And again, E25 is a bit of a cheat code for this mission because you could easily just go unspotted the entire game. And you can fire a gun and nothing will happen. But if you stay behind your team again and you allow them to spot and then you fall back, obviously you're going to need something that isn't a assault TD or anything like that, because you're going to need something quite stealthy. But WT Panzer IV, again, you could do WT Panzer IV in most of these, actually. It is probably one of the best TDs in the game, especially with that 560 alpha damage gun. But you could easily do that in that, and 4 kills is going to be a difficult one because it's very hard to sometimes get 4 kills without getting spotted and without having any prior damage to your vehicle. That also includes if you accidentally go down a hill and you say do 1 damage to your tank, that will then cancel out this mission. So be careful of that. But not getting spotted is quite important because obviously you don't want to be taking damage. So try to find something that's stealthy and that's going to do a lot of damage and also going to get the kills that you need. So I would recommend a WT Panzer IV, E25, something like that, or anything that you feel is good for your playstyle, but it needs to also be good enough to actually stay unspotted. Like, there's no point taking like an Object 268 V4 and then parking that at the back of the map. So you get what I mean? Good. Okay. TD8. This is one of my favorites. Cause 5 times more damage than the hit points of your vehicle. Now, to do this, we are going to go to tanks.gg and find out what is the lowest hit point tank at tier 6. And the lowest hit point tank, well, that is a TD at tier 6, is this thing. It has 620 hit points, and I don't actually think this tank is that bad. Like, considering the fact that it's not too inaccurate and it's got decent power to weight, you could easily get 3,100 damage in this. It's going to take you a while, but eventually you will get it. Not to mention that it's stealthy enough to get around the map. I mean, it doesn't have great view range, but, whatever. And the reload time isn't that bad. With 250 alpha, that's actually pretty decent for this, because tier 6 250 alpha is very nice to have. You could also use the Hellcat for this, because the Hellcat does get 610 hit points if you don't upgrade it. But realistically, you're going to probably want to just upgrade it, because otherwise you're going to be having to use this gun and stuff. So it's probably not the best, to be honest. So just upgrade that. It gets another, 20, 30 hit points. Yes, it's not the best, but it's going to help you out, because 240 damage, it gets good enough reload. It's not quite as good DPM as the WZ, so you could do that, but I mean, realistically, it's just whatever you feel comfortable in. The Dicamax is also a pretty viable option, because that actually gets the same hit points as the WZ. So if we have a look at that thing, this gets 620 hit points, and you could easily fully max this out. It does 300 alpha damage, which is quite nice, so it's only a few shots. The penetration isn't great, but I mean, you could go, full APCR, I guess, to just negate some of that. HE damage isn't great either, but it's manageable, and you do get good enough view range as well. The only problem with the Dicamax is that it is bloody slow at 10 power to weight. So it's probably not your first choice, to be honest. But I would do the WZ, see if you can get that. And if not, then, or if you don't have the WZ unlocked and you have the Hellcat unlocked, then try the Hellcat. But either one of them, they're a pretty good option. Now for TD9, score 6 armor penetrating hits in a row. Anything you want. Literally anything you want. Anything that you think is going to be accurate enough. I would actually recommend a tortoise or something like that, because that way you can get straight up into the enemy's face, spam APCR, do your 6 damage in hits, and just be done. Wouldn't even take that long. And you could destroy 5 enemy vehicles without too many issues either, if you wanted to go for the honors. I would recommend tortoise or badger. Either works. Yeah, but anything that you're comfortable in, that you think that you can score 6 penetrating hits in a row, and they do need to be in a row. You can't be missing a shell because then it will reset it. It won't reset the mission straight away, but it will reset the counter in the game. So when you're actually doing it, if you say pen 5 and then you miss one, it will just reset that back to 0, and then you could start again. You don't need to re-go into the whole game to be able to do it again. So it's not too hard of a mission, and shouldn't take you too long, to be honest. Now for TD10, this is where it starts getting a little bit difficult again. Cause 4,000 damage and remain unspotted at the time that the damage is caused. Now there's a few ways that you could do this. WT Panzer IV, again, is a pretty good tank to do this in. You could even do this in like a Jagdpanzer 100. Just spam heat and just make sure that you are well out the way of anyone's view range, and you would do it. This doesn't have to be... So, for example, if you play, you do 1,000 damage in a Jagdpanzer 100, let's say, and that counts as unspotted, and then later on in the game, you get spotted, it doesn't matter. It's just when that damage is caused, if you are unspotted. If you do the damage and you remain unspotted, and then the light tank comes around afterwards and spots you, that will still count. As long as when you do the damage, you are unspotted to the enemy. After you fire, doesn't matter. Obviously, if you fire and you get spotted because of that, it won't count. But if you do the damage and then you get spotted, it's completely different and it's fine. So, yeah. WT Panzer IV, even Jagdpanzer 100. Anything that you can still do damage at distance with without getting spotted. I would recommend higher tiers for this if you're going to go for, you know, the 260, but that's a given considering you are trying to get a tier 10. But yeah, those are the main two that I would choose. I mean, you could do it in a Gorilla, I guess, but to be honest, the WT Panzer IV is better than the Gorilla. TD11, nice and easy one if you have a Badger and a Tortoise. I'm not even joking. Like, this is very, very easy if you have a Badger or a Tortoise, because you could easily do 4,000 damage and you top player on damage done. If you get a tier 9 game in a Tortoise, you're laughing, especially if you get lower tiers in a Tortoise. It is just a joke how good that tank is, especially if it's all tricked out with, you know, you got turbo on it. You could even go like turbo, HP, and then rammer, or even vents, rammer, and turbo. So yeah, the Tortoise is just phenomenal for this mission. Again, you could do it in like a WT Panzer IV or even a Jagdpanzer 100. Jagdpanzer 100 again is another tank that's pretty good for this mission because you can just go in, do 1k alpha and then back off again. So that's not really too much of an issue. Anything that's kind of higher tier, you should be good with out of the tanks that I've spoken of. Or if you're just really, really good in a certain tank, E3, for example, can also work. Then you can use that. TD12, treat it exactly the same as the last one. Every single tank that I've mentioned, you could do it in. Again, Tortoise, very, very easy to do this in. 4,000 damage and destroy 3 tanks. With the amount of, you know, the reload time that you have in the Tortoise, you could easily kill 3 tanks and do 4,000 damage without any issues. But obviously higher tiers for this because you're going to need to get 4,000 damage kind of reliably and then hope that you get the 3 kills. So lower tiers aren't really going to cut it for this mission, but yeah, pretty much exactly the same as the previous one. And for TD13, any tank you want. Anything you want. Anything that you feel comfortable in that you can get 5 vehicles killed. It's mostly just going to be RNG, whether or not you can get the kills. So just play a tank that you enjoy, and eventually it will happen. That is my recommendation to you for that. Now for TD14, I recommend you play something that you do well in, because 25% of your total team's damage caused, it could be very, very easy because it's whatever your team's done. So if you get, for example, an encounter battle and your team decides to cap within the first 20 seconds, you could end up doing 1k damage and you've done 25% of your team's damage. That's the dream, but realistically, it's probably going to be something like the total on the enemy team is going to be like 25,000 for a tier 9 game or 20,000 for a tier 9 game. So you're going to need about 5,000 damage. So play something I would suggest at either tier 8 or tier 9, unless you feel really, really confident in tier 10. But bearing in mind, tier 10 could be up to like, 30,000 sometimes or whatever. With the amount of heavy tanks, it just all depends. So keep that in mind. But if you do it about tier 9 or tier 8, you're going to need about 5,000-6,000 damage to kind of comfortably sit there and then just win the game. So again, Tortoise. I mean, I do talk about the Tortoise a lot, but it is genuinely a good tank to try and do some of these missions in. You could end up doing this in the Scorpion G, SU-130 PM, something like that. I wouldn't go too high tier, but also not too low tier, unless you have the like very, very good tanks for doing that. Because 25% of the damage is obviously dependent on how much health the enemy team have and how much damage they have already done. Now, obviously, you want to pick something that's fast enough to get there, and also fast enough that if your team is suddenly just absolutely rolling through them, that you are going to be able to get some damage out of it. And the Tortoise can do that. It's going to struggle a little bit in turbo games, but not much you can really do there. But you also want something that is going to be withstanding some abuse against it. So yes, you can do that in like, a Scorpion G and stuff at longer range, but you're kind of then relying on your team and the map, especially to be able to get stuff done. So honestly, pick something that you enjoy and just play the game. Eventually this will happen. It's going to be annoying that you have to win the battle, but it will happen eventually. And now for TD15. And this is where if you want to actually receive the campaign orders where you can actually skip missions, you are going to have to complete this with honors. Cause 8,000 damage. It's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. Even I have just skipped this mission. It's not impossible. I have done it. I've just haven't had it activated because I've just not bothered. But I think I've done this in a... Hang on. I'll be able to tell you, actually. I mean, who could have guessed? I've done it in a Tortoise. But, yeah. I've done it in a Tortoise before, and I've come close in quite a few other tanks where I've got, 7,000 damage and stuff like that. This is hard to do. I'm not going to lie to you. 8,000 damage in a TD, if you don't enjoy it, it's not really going to happen. That's the truth of it. So, what I would suggest you do is get a TD that you really enjoy. I enjoyed the Tortoise a lot. It's just dependent on you. That's literally it. You don't need like a super like OP tank. Like if you play well in one tank and you can constantly get, like good damage, like this is by no means like super good like DPG for the Tortoise. I done this when I wasn't like, I done this a good few years ago. It's not even like I done it when I was super good at the game, and I'm not super good at the game, but compared to 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm a lot better than I was, back then. I just recommend you play your tank and eventually it will get done. For TD15s or any level 15 mission, I would just recommend you ignore it, because if you ignore it and just play the game and have fun, eventually it will get done. And as long as you're improving and as long as you're doing good damage, it will do it. And one day you'll just randomly get an amazing game, and then you'll get TD15 done. It will happen like that. It's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people. If you don't try and do the mission, it will get done because you just forget about it. There's no pressure on you. And what I actually recommend you do, if you only have level 15 missions remaining, is going into settings, battle notifications, and make sure that for the battle report and missions, these are turned off so that you don't even get notifications coming up saying that you're close to it or anything like that. If you turn it off, you get no notifications as you're playing in game, and there's no distractions that way. So it's not even like you can be distracted by it and think, oh, I'm actually really, really close. You can just forget about it and just play the game. So they are my recommendations for the 260. Hopefully this was useful to you. If it was, then of course you know what to do. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. If I've missed out any tanks, probably have missed out tanks, I'm not going to lie. Everyone has their own separate opinions and their own ways of doing things. So let me know your thoughts down below. If this was good, then let me know as well and I can continue. And next week, we should be moving on to, I think, medium tanks. Either medium tanks or heavy tanks, one of them. So let me know if you want any improvements for next week. So yeah, just let me know and I'll sort it all out. So thank you very much for watching and I'll see you all in the next one.